This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP, Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. It's November 5th, 2024, Election Day in Nashville, across Tennessee, and throughout the entire United States. The presidential race is on the ballot, of course, as well as congressional seats, many state legislative offices, and some local measures like Nashville's transit referendum. Of course, a lot of folks have already weighed in on all of those items up for vote. About 2.2 million Tennesseans have already voted in some way. That's early voters, along with folks who sent in absentee and mail-in ballots. Now, the state's overall early voting turnout is about 3% lower than in the last presidential election. But also, some kinds of early voting weren't open to as many people this time around. Remember, the last presidential election was in the fall of 2020. That was still the height of the pandemic, before we had COVID vaccines. There were special permissions for a short time that expanded access to mail-in ballots for people who didn't feel they could safely vote in person. And, some of us just aren't early voters. I really like going to the polls on the actual election day. Now, I have lucked out in the logistics of it all. My work schedule lets me go while many folks are still at work, so I don't have to stand in a long line. And I live just a couple of blocks from my polling place. Over the years, it's become a tradition to walk to the polls with my husband as soon as he gets home. And when we get there, it's usually the same group of poll workers assigned to that site. I don't know most of their names, but we recognize each other's faces. There's always a warm hello, and it's good to see you again. It feels like community. I mean, as it should, right? Given that what we're doing is fundamental to operating this great communal undertaking that is a democratically run society. Last week, our daily show, This is Nashville, focused on the behind-the-scenes work of making elections happen. We'll actually hear an excerpt from that later in this episode. But I'll just say now that one of the guests was a poll worker who talked about having that same warm feeling on his side of the table. That sense of folks being happy to be there, of coming together, taking an active role in charting our collective future. Of course, there are some fears surrounding elections, too. Fear of what might happen if certain candidates win, and fear that some might try to manipulate the results in one way or another. That's why the FBI and the Department of Justice are setting up a special command post for the election. Those officials say they're ready to investigate any reports of voter suppression, cyber attacks, foreign influences, threats to election workers, or any kind of fraud. In the event that you spot anything suspicious, the command center has a local number to call. It's 615-232-7500. But the main thing to remember is just to get out and have your say if you haven't already. As I've talked about before on this podcast, Tennessee trails the nation in voter turnout. Relatively few people here take part in determining who will lead this community, this state, this nation. But this is the day to turn those numbers around by going to the polls and casting your vote. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And once they close, you can, of course, find special coverage of the results from WPLN News on 90.3 FM and our website, WPLN.org. Or if you want to tune out for the night, we'll have the most up-to-date result in this podcast tomorrow morning. In just a few minutes, that conversation with the folks who run elections in Nashville. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together, a themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Voters in Tennessee with prior felony convictions got the green light to cast a ballot less than 24 hours before polls opened today. WPLN's Miriam reports the judge's order comes after a state appeal, and the state could still file another.
A judge had initially restored the voting rights of 4 people in September, but right before the voter registration deadline, the state appealed. That's because Tennessee requires people with felony convictions to get their right to own a gun reinstated before their right to vote is restored. But most felonies come with a lifetime ban on gun ownership.
Why fight so hard against someone who is trying to do the next right thing? Why fight so hard to keep me out of a voting poll?
That's Amanda Hopkins, one of the 4 petitioners who might be able to vote in this election. The judge's order opens the door, but the final decision is up to the Election Commission. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
This election day, all eyes are on the top of the ballot as Americans head to the polls to pick the next president. This is a consequential election for the other candidates on the ballot, too. WPLN's Mariana Baca-Yao reports on what's at stake for Tennessee's state and federal races.
There are 2 key issues: gun safety and abortion rights. On the federal level, Democratic candidates for the U.S. Senate and Congress have campaigned on reestablishing abortion rights nationwide. But right now, the issue is completely up to the states. So Democratic candidates hoping to unseat incumbent Republicans in the state house are stressing their support for exceptions to the state's abortion ban in the case of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. Gun safety is also top of mind after the shooting at the Covenant School last year. On a local level, candidates for the State House have campaigned on their support for red flag laws, which allow law enforcement to confiscate guns from people deemed a threat to themselves or others. Republican candidates have stood by their party and opposed red flag laws and exceptions to Tennessee's abortion ban. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Democrats are hoping that abortion will be one issue that drives progressive voters to the polls this election. That was true for voter Lakeisha Wiggins, a Nashville native who cast her vote at the Bordeaux Library. She said that abortion was one of the factors influencing her to vote for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump.
Well, I feel like as a woman, a man really doesn't have a right to say what to do with my body, because not to say we brought them into this world, but we're the ones that carry them. So I feel like regardless of whatever happens, I think solely should be the woman's decision. Whatever she decides, that has to be up with her.
Tennessee has one of the strictest abortion bans in the country, with no exceptions for rape or incest. Harris has vowed to restore reproductive freedoms or veto any national abortion ban that comes across her desk. A high-stakes local decision is on the ballot for Nashville today. The transit referendum that would establish a half-cent sales tax increase to fund $3 billion worth of major transportation upgrades. WPLN has been hearing from voters, and Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams says there's a big question mark over its outcome.
The flagship effort of Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell's first year in office is coming to a head. Plenty of officials have signed off on the transit referendum. Now, it will be considered by the ultimate adjudicators, voters. And they're torn.
I voted in 2018 for that transit plan. I was a bit taken aback by how resoundingly it was rejected. I don't have any optimism for this one because of that.
That's Benjamin Legg, a West Nashville professor. He considers the referendum the most important race on his ballot and voted for. But his pessimism isn't unfounded. Here's Crystal Miller, an Antioch resident.
I did vote against transit. I have some worries because Nashville is so big and so busy, but it's expensive to live here, and I think just financially, it's something that we couldn't do right now.
The decision will be made tonight. Will voters opt for an improved transit system, or is the cost too high? Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Nashville's transit agency WeGo is offering free rides on all of its routes today. You don't need to be a voter to take advantage of the free rides. They're available to everyone who hops on board. But if you are voting, the transit app will have the locations of each polling place so you can plan your trip. For the second year in a row, Tennessee has been given a D grade for how it treats people with disabilities by the group Tennessee Disability Coalition. According to the CDC, close to 1 in 3 Tennesseans experience some form of disability, which the organization calls the largest minority group in the state. The scorecard assesses several priority areas like access to care, education, housing, and mental health services. It cites the WPLN and ProPublica investigation into the Richard L. Bean Juvenile Services Center in Knoxville as part of the reason the state received a poor grade in the access to justice category, stating that children with disabilities are being criminalized and mistreated. While the coalition says that the state legislature did make some strides last year, it wasn't enough to raise the grade, only to keep it from falling further. Quincy Jones, one of popular music's best-known composers, arrangers, and producers, has died. His impact was felt throughout the entertainment industry, especially in New York and L.A. Senior music writer Julie Height says Jones also made his mark on Nashville in seldom recognized ways.
Jones's vast recording credits include arranging and conducting for a jazz pop album that Brooke Benton made in Nashville in the early 1960s and producing a sleek post-disco project for Nashville resident Donna Summer 20 years later. His cosmopolitan pop sensibilities also touched Dan Huff, who played guitar on Michael Jackson sessions led by Jones before going on to shape contemporary country recording. And producers Shannon Sanders and A.B. Eastwood both found important templates in Jones's career. Just as he modeled stylistic limitlessness and professional ambition even during racial segregation, they've transcended musical divides in the Nashville industry. Julie Height, WPLN News.
The tech giant Oracle is partnering with Nashville's Meharry Medical College to create a health innovation hub. Oracle wants to establish its world headquarters here and provide the historically black college access to the tech company's artificial intelligence software. College administrators say the partnership will provide students with hands-on training and research in Oracle technology, as well as create a wellness center. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. If you go to vote on Election Day at any of the 178 precincts here in Davidson County, you're welcomed and assisted by trained poll officials. WPLN's Catherine Cesis brings us this report on the officials who help make sure voters cast their ballots as easily and quickly as possible.
Mark Blankenship decided to become a poll official when he recently moved back to Tennessee.
When I registered to vote, I saw the little checkbox that said, check here if you'd be interested in participating as a poll official. And something just told me, yes, this is a way that I can express my gratitude to be back in my home state. And I worked my first election over the summer, and that instinct proved to be exactly correct.
Blankenship received training from the Davidson County Election Commission, which involved watching online videos and passing tests. He also had the chance to go to workshops to practice protocols in person. Poll official training helps people decide what kind of work they want to do for an election. Check people in as a registrar, help explain how to vote as a machine operator, or oversee a whole polling place as an officer. Blankenship chose to work as a registrar for his first election and loved it.
Oh, it was so much fun. That was one of the things I wasn't anticipating. It was so much fun because you're in a room with people who are enacting their opportunity to be a true part of the system. We had people who were so obviously happy to be there. There were people bringing their children and getting the future voter sticker for the children. And that sense of enthusiastic participation in the democratic process was, for me, it provided spiritual succor.
Anyone 16 years or older can sign up, and poll officials become employees of Metro government for the days they work during an election. Preparing for voting starts before voters show up. Christiev Alfine has been a poll official since 2016. She now works as an officer.
I like to get there a day or two before to kind of set the room up as much as I can and ask any workers if they would like to come to see, okay, this is what it's like, this is where we're at. Then the morning of, I get there at 6, we all get around and put everything together, and the day carries on, and Jeff and his team are always there if I have any crazy issues.
She's talking about Jeff Roberts, the administrator of elections for Davidson County. If anything unusual happens, like a team can't get into a building in the morning, or a voter needs a provisional ballot, officers can call Roberts, who spends Election Day with his team at a command center. But most election days run smoothly. Outside of helping voters cast their ballots, poll officials regularly address issues like voters with an address change or anyone wearing campaign gear into a polling place. Alfine stays upbeat when she encounters that.
You can't wear a campaign shirt of anybody that's on the ballot. So I've had to have people like turn their shirt inside out. I'm going to bring a big couple range advocates this time because some people just don't want to do it, but I want them to vote.
At 7 p.m., a poll official will join the end of the line of voters to serve as the cutoff for the last voter that polling place can accept. Then they pack up the equipment and 2 officials, the officer and another official from a different political party, deliver the official memory stick with the vote count back to the Election Commission. Paper ballots follow. Blankenship is working his first presidential election this year. He takes his commitment to his community seriously and finds a lot of hope in the process.
This is a day when we can experience America at its best. And so to be in a space where we've asked everyone to leave politics at the door and bring democracy in is, to me, quite heartening.
Catherine Cece's WPLN News.
You can hear more about the behind the scenes of local elections in the This Is Nashville podcast feed. And we do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love, that vote for the Nash Villager podcast, really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.